اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانزل علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah, I'm going to go over what we're going to do inshallah in this class, and then go through, for people that were here yesterday, I'm going to go through the same 10 principles except related to seerah. And this class inshallah is, I'll get to it in the hukum, but it's considered mandub. So it's a, for me, it's a very enjoyable subject, and it's a completely stress-free subject also, because it's not meant to, there aren't ahkam related to it, in the sense that you're not learning things to actually related to ibadah and things, but it's more an internal type of subject, which I'll get to talking about that when we get to the benefits of it. The goal of it is to cover the salient features of the Prophet ﷺ's life and mission, and also to increase our love for him through learning about his noble life and struggles. The books that I'm going to use, inshallah, I'm going to go through the Bayquniyah. How many people were in that class of the Mustalahat al-Hadith? All right, so it'll be a review for you, and I'm going to go through it fast. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm just going to go cover the Bayquniyah, which is only 34 lines of poetry, so I'll do a few lines every week, and they'll be very short. And then the other book is the Shama'il of Imam at-Tirmidhi, radiyallahu anhu, and it's a very famous book. It's part of his Sunan collection, and there is an edition of it that's going to be available this week in Arabic and English. And then also the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Martin Lings, which I think there might be better seerah out there now. I don't know, because I just haven't followed the English seerah literature. But that's the book that I'm familiar with, because I have read it more than once in English. So, but for seerah, I've read mostly just Arabic seerah literature. But I like it. It's very eloquent, and basically what he did was he took the Mukhtasar of Ibn Hisham and translated it into English, pretty much. I mean, I've actually compared sections in there with the Mukhtasar of Ibn Hisham, and it's very similar, and I'll talk a little bit about Ibn Hisham later. The class schedule today, inshallah, we'll cover the 10 foundations, and then in the second class we're going to cover the qualities of a sound hadith, a hadith sahih, and then look at the 4 babs of Imam at-Tirmidhi's book, and then cover 1 through 10 in Ling's book. They're short chapters, it's about 30 pages. I'm planning on doing 30 pages a week to cover the book. And if you don't have a copy of it, there's going to be some copies available, and you need to talk to Freydun about that. It's available at bookstores. And on the third week, I want to cover, and I put them in Roman numerals because that's the way he does them in the book. All right, it's not any preference for Roman numerals. Martin Lings is a classicist, by the way. I mean, his background is Greek and Latin. He knows Arabic very well. He taught Shakespearean literature in Cairo for about 20 years. So you'll notice that in his writing that he tends towards a kind of archaic, classical writing, which for some people is really enjoyable. Other people find it a little bit difficult. Abd Hakim Murad is another person that writes somewhat in that style, probably not as much as Martin Lings. I haven't really thought about it that much. But I like both their styles a lot. And then we'll look at 5 through 10 in Imam Tirmidhi's book, which is not a lot of material either. The class 4 will cover 12 through 30 in Ling's, a weak hadith, and 11 through 15 in Imam Tirmidhi. And then you can just look through that yourselves. It's on there. Finally, there's some other material, particularly the Shifa al-Qadi Iyad, which has been republished in paperback, and it's really worth having. I think, I haven't read the whole English translation, but I think it's a reasonably good translation. It's a brilliant book. If you can read Arabic, I would recommend getting it in Arabic. It's considered one of the, they say لولا عياض لما عرف المغرب. Had it not been for Iyad, nobody would have ever heard of Morocco. And they said, وَلَوْلَا الشِّفَاء لَمَا عُرِفَ الْمُصْطَفَى. And had it not been for his book, the Shifa, the Prophet would never have been known. Which is an exaggeration, but it's just praising him as a man and also praising the book. It's an extraordinary book. And it's really related to Sirah literature, but it's also particularly what he does in that book is he identifies the rights the Prophet ﷺ has over us as his followers. Because he has certain rights, and that's the importance of the book. It's called Ash-Shifa fi Ta'rif Huquq al-Mustafa, the cure in explaining or in teaching you the rights of the Prophet Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it was also traditionally in Morocco a book that people read when people were ill. They would go to the house and read the entire book at the bedside of an ill person with the intention of a shifa. It's a book that's also been extensively studied in West Africa and in North Africa, and had a very high position in the madrasa system. And it's also well known in the East, and it was commented on by several Eastern scholars, including Mullah Ali al-Qari, the great Muhaddith and Hanafi scholar. So, inshallah, the class will meet 10 to 11:30 to 45, depending on whether the material is fully covered. And I would say, hopefully everybody will have read. I'm not going to quiz or test anybody, but there will be some discussion, so I hope people read the pages before they come to the class. Write some notes about it, what you want to do. A good thing to do is outline it also. And then my request, particularly in this class, because of the nature of the class is, I mean in all classes, but particularly in this class, is that people really focus on adab, because part of what learning about the Prophet ﷺ is learning about adab and how to behave. It would include dressing properly for the men and the women. I personally really don't like people to wear informal clothes like jeans and t-shirts and things like that. Traditionally, students of knowledge were supposed to have dressed accordingly to reflect what they were studying, and it was the tradition of Imam Malik actually to take a shower before he taught classes about the Prophet ﷺ. He would take a ghusl, put on scent, put on his turban, actually do bukhur in the majlis, burn oud to create an environment, and also elevate the nufus, because the nufus, when they smell good scents, it reminds them of paradise, which is one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ said, or is reported to have said, حُبِّبَ إِلَيَّ ثَلَاثٌ مِّن دُنْيَاكُمْ. 3 things were made beloved to me from your dunya: النِّسَاء وَالطِّيبُ وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ الْعَيْنِ فِي الصَّلَاةِ. Women and perfume and prayer was made, the coolness of my eye was made in prayer. In other words, his enjoyment in life was in prayer. So, طيب is part of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And they also say that perfume, there's no extravagance in perfume. In other words, if you buy expensive perfume, you don't look at it like you're wasting money, because perfume is actually considered sadaqah for other people. In other words, if you put on perfume, initially you'll smell it, but after that you don't smell it. Whereas when you come up to people, they smell it. You see, so really perfume, the point of perfume is not you, it's for other people. And so it's considered a sadaqah. And for that reason, they say that you should buy good scent. And the Prophet ﷺ bought the best scent. Even though he was very frugal in his other matters, in perfume, he actually wore the best perfume. So that's just a reminder about that. It's a good sunnah. For women, obviously, it's not a sunnah to wear perfume that emanates unless she's in her home and not going out. So that's a reminder to the sisters. And then also another thing, in all these classes, hopefully, just men and women should have regard for each other, and there shouldn't be, allow the women, when they need to get through for the prayer and things like that, the time for them to get back, so that there's just not an inappropriate mixing of men and women, which is also part of our deen. And then also lowering the eyes is also important, and lack of inappropriate interaction, respect towards each other, and also to the facilitators, Freydun, and the people that are facilitating the madrasa, and then also to the teacher is part of the tradition, and vice versa, the teacher towards the students. No raising of voices. One of the things Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said, that if a hadith is being related, if you actually speak during the relation of the hadith, you have done a grave wrong action. Because the Quran prohibits us from raising our voices when the Prophet, in the presence of the Prophet. And when you hear a hadith, they say that the adab of listening to a hadith is to actually focus in that you actually experience the presence of the Prophet ﷺ as if he himself is telling you the hadith, even though it's being transmitted through a chain of transmission, but that chain should be with an isnad, so it's linked back to the Prophet ﷺ. So when you hear a hadith, you should have a respect for it. And Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, when he heard a hadith that said the color of his face changed, and he would often lower his head. And this was the type of reverence that the early community showed to the hadith, so that's also important. And then also not speaking when other people are speaking, and not speaking to each other when the teacher's speaking. These are all part of our traditional adab, and I think most people would, even who are not Muslims, would recognize the basic humanity in those principles. So in terms of looking at seerah, the seerah literature is very vast, and many people have written on the Prophet ﷺ's life, and it's been an area of concern in this ummah since the very beginning. To look at its definition, and traditionally in the Muslim world, when a subject was taught, they looked at the 10 foundations, or mabda, or mabadi. The first is the had, which is the definition. The second is the mawdu', which is the topic. The third is the wadi', which is the founder of that science, the person who first set it down. The four is the ism, which is the name, and there might be more than one, which is important to know that. And then also the istimdad, which is sources of that science, where it's being derived from. And then also the hukm shar'i, which is the legal ruling according to Islam. In other words, what is it considered legally? It goes under one of the 5 categories. And then tasawwur al-masail is conceptualizing the concerns of the science. It's similar to the topic, only it goes into a little more detail, just understanding what you're actually studying. What are the... And then the virtue is the fadila, which is what is the virtue of the science. In other words, more than just the benefit, but actually What is the merit of studying? Thank you. What is the merit of studying the science? That's a good way of saying it. And then the nisba is what is the relation, or in other words, what is the association of the science? What category do you put that science in? So it's the category that science goes under. Is it like now we would say hard sciences, the humanities, that type thing? Which category do we place it in? And then finally, what is the fa'ida or the thamra, the fruit of the science? What is the fruit of the science? What are the benefits derived from learning that? So these are the 10 foundations of any science, but particularly this was the way our ulama looked at what they were studying first, and then this is also the way that they would introduce the subject matter to the students at the onset of the class. So in light of that tradition, that's why I'm doing this. In terms of its definition, this science is a science that's concerned with Ayyam al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There's a verse in the Quran which says, وَذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ. Remind them of the days of Allah. أَيَّامِ اللَّهِ. And what that means is remind them of how Allah has interacted in His creation through giving victory to His prophets and their people, and through destroying the people that were adverse to Him. And there's also a tradition called Ayyam al-Arab. It's an extensive literary tradition in the Arabic world, which relates to the Jahili times. The days of the Arabs before Islam. Their kings, their rulers, their virtuous people like Hatim al-Jud or Hatim al-Ta'i, or Mundhir. Many stories about Wafa, very famous. There was one man who had what he was a Yemeni king, had Yom al-Bu'as wa Yom al-Farah, the day, a good day, a black day, and a white day, bad day. And if a guest came to him on the bad day, he had their head cut off. If he came to him on the good day, he'd give him a lot of money and give him a lot. And it was just every other day, that's what he did. And people didn't know when they were going to show up. And once a Bedouin came to him, and it was a bad day. And he begged him, he said, I've got a lot of affairs that I need to take care of, and just give me 1 year, and I'll come back, and then you can do whatever you want with me. And so he left, and after a year, right before the sun was going down, he was kind of pacing backward and forward, realizing that he probably shouldn't have let him go. He wasn't going to show up. And this Bedouin man showed up right before the sun went down. He said, it's been a year. You can kill me now. And he said, why did you come back? And he said, al-wafa, which is fulfilling one's word. And so he was so impressed with that, he decided to stop killing people on his bad day. And so that's called Ayyam al-Arab. It's telling you about the stories of the Jahili Arabs. The Ayyam Allah are telling us about the stories of the prophets in the Quran, those things. And the Prophet was commanded to remind us about these events because they increase one's iman. The Sirah is about Ayyam al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It is the life of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That is its concern. So it's huwa al-ilm al-bahith an Ayyam al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's its definition. And it also looks at his ahwal, the conditions of the Prophet ﷺ, the conditions of his hunger, the conditions of his house, his family, how he lived, his birth, the state of his society before him, who his parents were, who his ancestors were. It also is concerned with his maghazi. It's a very important aspect of Sirah, and it's actually considered a branch of Sirah which is the battles of the Prophet ﷺ. It's a very important aspect, and the first 3 centuries put an incredible focus on maghazi. They really focused on actually studying the maghazi of the Prophet ﷺ, and Lings, I think, does a reasonably good job dealing with a lot of the maghazi because they're very important. Badr, Uhud, Hunayn, these are important. Tabuk, the Ghazwa of Tabuk. These are very important for us to understand really that jihad is an essential aspect of this deen. It always has been, and it's supposed to always be. And that's the importance of learning about the maghazi, is learning about the Prophet ﷺ's military struggles as well as his spiritual struggles and his social struggles. So it's concerned with the ayyam al-Nabi ﷺ, and then it's also concerned with the character of the Prophet ﷺ, both in description and in behavior. So his khalquhu wa khuluquhu. His character is his khalq, his outward form is his khalq, and his inward form is his khuluq. All right, so it's concerned with how the Prophet physically looked and also how he behaved, outwardly and inwardly, with other people and between his Lord. So that's part of it, and that is traditionally called shama'il. Shama'il. That's science. It's part of seerah literature. And they have also included in the seerah his mother's pregnancy, the condition of Amina, also his rada'a, the weaning of the Prophet, the wet nursing and the weaning of the Prophet ﷺ, Halim al-Sa'diyah, and these matters are considered part of his seerah. And then it all should be understood that this is not hadith. In other words, seerah is seen as a distinct science outside of hadith. The hadith literature is concerned with three things: the aqwal of the Prophet, the af'al of the Prophet, and the taqrirat or taqarir of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The aqwal are his words. The af'al are his deeds. And the taqrirat are those things that he saw or that were done in his presence, and he did not condemn them, or he encouraged them. It could have been that he was silent, and that is taqrir, aqarrahu. If he was silent in the presence of an action that relates to worship or anything else, then it's considered acceptable, and it could fall under the category of sunnah, depending on what type of action it was. And that's the business of the usuliyin, to decide that, the people of juristic methodology. So if it falls under one of those three categories, then it's considered part of the hadith literature. Now, some of the muhaddithun will include the descriptions of the Prophet, the sifat, in the hadith literature also, but generally that goes under seerah literature. It doesn't, although you'll find it in hadith, but much of the seerah is found in the hadith literature. So if people just understand that, the focus of seerah is not the focus of hadith. Another important distinction about seerah and hadith. Hadith, the hukam, the legal ruling in Sharia, is based on hadith, where it's not on seerah. Seerah literature is not considered a source of legislation in Islam. And one of the things about seerah literature is the ulama were very lenient about what got into the literature, unlike the hadith collection. The hadith collection has very stringent methodologies, which we'll talk about inshallah. Whereas the seerah literature, there's a tasahul. There's a type of acceptance of narrations because they relate to what are called fada'il a'mal, virtuous actions, and manaqib, which are virtuous qualities. And so you will find that the people of seerah will hear a story and relate it, even though they don't have a strong sanad for it. And sometimes it might not have a sanad at all, because Ibn Ishaq is very early. And at that time they were still recording things sometimes without sanad, like Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, who does that in the Muwatta, based on belief that the sources were valid and people were still reasonably good. So that's basic definition of what seerah literature is about. Now, the topic, the mawdu' of it is literally the Dhatun Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the essence of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in relation to his days, the events of his life, and to his descriptive states, and to his moral character. That's the topic, all right, which is different from the definition. All right, and then you have the founder. Who is the founder of this science? The founder of the science is the Sahaba. Because the Sahaba early on recognized the importance of the Prophet ﷺ's life. And they recognized also the importance of transmitting every detail about the Messenger of Allah, because they realized, one, that he was a Messenger of Allah, two, that he was the last Messenger of Allah and there would not be a messenger after him, and three, that love of Allah is linked to following the Messenger of Allah. And if you don't follow the Messenger of Allah, then you cannot achieve the love of Allah. And following the Messenger of Allah, according to the first community, was not simply in ibadat, which is from an obligation, but in adat, or habitual behavior as well. And I'll go into that a little bit more when we get to the benefits of the science. So the other thing about this science is the first founders were obviously the Sahaba, who were transmitting what they witnessed in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, his miracles, his character, his descriptions. We have very accurate descriptions of the Prophet, to the point really where if somebody wanted, we're prohibited to do this, but if somebody wanted to draw a picture of the Prophet ﷺ, who was good at that, like these people who do police, who can just hear a description and draw a very good picture of somebody, and oftentimes when you see the person, once they apprehend them and the original picture, it's pretty extraordinary how close they can actually get to the people, and that's based on eyewitness descriptions of people that describe them well. And the truth is, although that's a very bad analogy, I don't even like to put the Prophet ﷺ in that category of analogy at all whatsoever. But the point being is that if somebody was good at that, they could probably draw an extremely accurate picture of the Prophet ﷺ, because of the extraordinary precision with which the Sahaba conveyed how his face was, including his nose, his eyes, his mouth, his teeth. We have a very accurate description, and his beard, how many gray hairs were in the beard, the fact that his hair was wavy, and all of these things are related in the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi, which you'll see. And part of the blessing of the Sahaba transmitting that is that it gives us access to the Prophet ﷺ, despite the fact that we actually did not witness him while he was walking the earth, but we have an opportunity to draw close to him through his descriptions.